So, this is almost like a complete inverse of last time, because last time we started with a great episode, and we ended with an okay episode. Whereas with today's review, we're going to be doing an okay episode first, and a really good yet strange episode for second place. So, like I said, it's almost like a complete inverse. So, this should be interesting. What's up? What's happening? What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Animation Station. You're discussing anything with animation, including SpongeBob Lives in the Pineapple Under the Sea, as well as TVs and movies as well. I am your host, Jackson Small. Welcome to yet another SpongeBob Month Chapter 5 review. Today, we are taking a look at Slimy dancing and the Krusty Sponge. An episode that is kind of hard to talk about, but I'll give it my best try. But I still have a little bit of time to prep for that one, so why don't we go ahead and knock out Slimy dancing first. So, Slimy dancing. I'm not gonna lie, until I just recently rewatched it, I even forgot this episode exists. Not a good sign. But I will say this, the episode overall is still just okay. But it is the most average episode to ever average in the history of average. So what's the plot here? Well, there's a dance competition, and Squidward gets rejected because, he's Squidward. So he tries to train SpongeBob and Patrick after they actually manage to get selected. And then a weird thing happens where Squidward ends up in SpongeBob. Like, he takes away his arms and legs and puts his arms and legs through him. And he decides to pose as him for the dance competition. And, as you can expect, it doesn't go very well. But in the weirdest way, it also kind of ends up benefiting them. And it leads to a really weird epilogue where there's a kid that looks like he's having a seizure, but when his mom tries to call 911, he says he's just doing the cramp. I could have done without the Caesar joke, thank you. Like, that felt distasteful. So is there anything good in the episode? Well, I will give it this. The part with Squidward in SpongeBob's body is a highlight. I do think not only it is an interesting visual, but it's also a better way to do it than SquidBob Tentacle Pants did, because it's not gross out. Instead, it's just Squidward trying to pose as SpongeBob. And the way that it actually leads into creating the cramp is funny. Not to mention, what's also really interesting is the results of the dance competition itself, because SpongeBob and Squidward does actually win the competition, but they disqualified because they actually cheated by having two people. So, what happens instead? Well, Patrick ends up winning because every other contestant turned out is using a partner. You think that they would be a little bit more strict about that, but it's also kind of funny. But again, it leads into that weird epilogue that has just no point in being in the episode, outside of one very distasteful joke about seizures. Like, come on, man. That was just distasteful. But outside of that, the episode's okay. I thought the limbo gag was actually pretty funny in the first few parts, where Squidward keeps running into the freaking limbo pole that SpongeBob and Patrick are just holding out for no reason. Which I will admit got a few good laughs out of me, so that keeps the episode from being bad. And what also keeps it from being bad is, again, I do think that they did do something really creative here by having Squidward inside of SpongeBob. And I do find it funny when he takes away his arms and legs and even his mouth. Like, it is funny. So, yeah, I mean, outside of that, again, the most average episode to ever average in the history of average. It's okay. It has some good moments, but then it has a bunch of weird bad moments. So, it all averages out to a 5 out of 10 episode. It's just okay. It has some good moments. I do think the highlight's still pretty funny, but it's just so average. it just feels like filler. Almost the entire episode just feels like filler. So, with that said, let's go ahead and switch gears and get a little more positive, because now we're going to talk about the Krusty Sponge. So, this is an interesting episode of SpongeBob, to say the very least, because it kind of feels like an allegory for Nickelodeon in a way. Let me explain the plot, and you'll kind of understand what I mean. A food critic comes into the Krusty Krab, and he gives it a really bad review, and throws out all these puns. But he does say that the one positive thing he had there was SpongeBob. So, Krabs takes this to heart and ends up over-marketing the ever-living frick out of SpongeBob. From SpongeBob napkins to a SpongeBob train to changing the Krusty Krab name to the Krusty Sponge, which is where the episode title comes from, having Squidward in a SpongeBob mascot suit. And later on, all the way at the end of the episode, he starts selling sponge patties. Yeah, he goes a little bit too far with it, and it ends up with him in jail. I'll talk about that part later. So the first part I want to talk about with this episode is the critic himself, because he's actually voiced by a real critic. I believe his name is Gene Statlin? Editing, correct me. Yes, that guy. Thank you. And he's one of the critics that actually reviewed the first SpongeBob movie, which is interesting. So it's kind of like, in a way, thanking him for showing support for the series. And it's interesting to have an actual fellow movie critic as a voice in an episode where he plays a critic. That's a very interesting approach, and I think it kind of works. And I do kind of like this character that he plays. Yes, obviously it's just him probably being himself, but I think it works, and I do like the design of the fish himself, and the way he comes back at the end of the episode and the jury is actually pretty funny. So yeah, and not to mention I did really like his puns. His puns did get me laughing a bit. So yeah, it's kind of cool to have an actual critic as a voice actor in an episode. It's pretty cool. So props to the SpongeBob team for that. That's actually a really cool, interesting idea. So, yeah, praise for that part. I'm also going to praise the part where, well, they overmarket SpongeBob. Again, it's an allegory and a metaphor for Nickelodeon and what they've been doing with SpongeBob for the past, 10, 20 years at this point? Just milking the ever-living frick out of the franchise. Like, I don't know if that was intentional by the writers, but it is a funny parody of what Nickelodeon actually does to SpongeBob. Like, again, I'm pretty sure that wasn't intentional, but I find that pretty funny. Squidward in the mascot suit is hilarious. I absolutely love this part of the episode. It's not my highlight. It was almost the highlight until the ending came. And I really enjoyed him in the costume. Not only because the costume is interesting, because it doesn't allow him to use his hands or his arms. So you have him with these, limp noodle arms almost this entire episode, which is pretty funny. But also because it's just a really strange visual. Because Squidward's so tall, he literally has to have his head and the eye holes in the hat, rather than down where SpongeBob's eyes actually should be in the costume. It's so funny. And the comedy we get around him, it's not Squidward torture porn. Before you ask, it is not Squidward torture porn, because it's actually funny. So, yeah, it's a pretty good episode. My only problem with the episode, I gotta say, is the beginning. The beginning part with the critic, it is pretty slow. Because it wasn't really until we got to the news broadcast where the critic gives his review of the Krusty Krab where I actually kind of got invested in the episode. Because outside of that, it started really slow and felt like filler. Why was the filler there? I don't know. Maybe to fill 11 minutes? And then the actual ending does feel like a bit of a loophole for Mr. Krabs to get out of going to jail. Yeah, I could have done without that. So, what's my highlight of the episode? I gotta say it's the ending, where when he's selling these sponge patties and it ends up poisoning all the customers into acting like zombies and scaring poor SpongeBob. where they get like his spots on him. They all turn yellow, and they have these big, jutting out stomachs. Like, it's interesting. It's a very weird zombie parody thing that they would later go on and do again in season 11 with Krabby Patty Creature feature. But here it's done more comedically rather than being terrifying. And it still oddly works. Not to mention, it turns out one of the people in the Krusty Krab is a detective, and he arrests Krabs on the spot. Rightfully. And then Krabs goes to court, and everyone in the court, including the critic, finds him guilty. And right when the judge is about to sentence him, we see that he's using a SpongeBob mallet. I won't lie, up to that point, that was pretty funny. But then the episode came around to the actual ending, and it got a little bit, bad. As in, the mayor turns out to be a huge SpongeBob fan, just like everybody else. So, Krabs' loophole to getting out of going to jail is to let the judge ride around on the SpongeBob train. But poor Squidward has to be the one that commandeers it. Yeah, that part felt a little bit like a Squidward torture porn, but it wasn't to the point of being annoying, so I'll give it a little bit of a pass. But still, I wish Krabs actually got consequence for what he did at the end. That's my big problem with the episode. Like, they were building it up like Krabs was going to get a huge consequence at the end of the episode, and then they kind of just wussed out. I don't know why, but they wussed out, and it's a huge shame. But, I mean, outside of that, it's still a pretty good episode. I was laughing a good bit, I was having a good time, and again, it's a hilarious metaphor for Nickelodeon itself. And again, pretty cool to have an actual movie critic as a guest in an episode. I can't think of another cartoon that actually did that, so props for originality. So, final verdict for the Krusty Sponge is all in all going to round up to a 7 out of 10. It's a very good episode, it's a very entertaining episode, but the ending does kind of ruin it a bit, and I do think that the beginning is very slow. If they fix those two things, I could see this being upwards to at least a 9. But as it is, it's a 7 out of 10, it is a very good episode, and I definitely recommend you give it a watch if you haven't already. Well, that's it. Time to move on now to final thoughts and rankings. Well, it's another one where it's kind of clear who wins, but it's a lot less big of a gap. But once again, I don't want second place to be in shame, because yes, second place is Slimy dancing, but it's an okay episode. I don't want it to be in shame because the episode isn't bad per se. It's just really bizarre, weird, and has a very, very strange ending. But, I mean, it still has its funny moments. I'll watch it if it's on TV, but it's not one I'm really going to actively revisit. Whereas the Krusty Sponge, on the other hand, is definitely one I'm going to be revisiting. Not only because I want to see how true it ends up being as an allegory for Nickelodeon itself, but also because the episode is just very entertaining and enjoyable. Yes, it's not a great episode, but it gets admirably close. It has some pretty good moments, and I applaud the SpongeBob team for doing something unique. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I got for this episode review. So thank you all so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more videos like this almost every single day. And stay tuned, because next time, we're gonna have to go out of order a little bit, because, in between two normal episodes, in this next part of Season 5 is a giant special. So, what we're gonna do is instead, we're gonna take a look at the episode that's before the special, and the episode after the special. And then the day after will be the actual special review. So, I'll see you guys next time when we talk about Sing a Song of Patrick and Picture Day. So, till then, thanks for watching. I'm Dad Small of Amy Sensation, and I'll see you next time. Peace. We cannot take it anymore.